It's a city council meeting. It's a hearing. It's a public hearing.
Move your camera over a little bit so you'll see me just a little bit that way.
Nobody.
Are you moving?
I don't know. I can never tell.
You're not.
Are we live? We're live.
Stop. Mute yourself. She just muted you.
Who muted me? Somebody muted
Oh.
me?
You just unmuted yourself.
I want to unmute myself. I got this now. I know how to work it. Thank you for your support. Okay, I just need to get this into some view where I can see people. Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Counselor, you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to see anything right now because we have the slide up for recording purposes. So once you're ready to get started, we'll start recording and we'll take the slide down.
Candace, would it be possible to promote me to co-host so I could help facilitate things?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, Jacob.
Hi,
Hi.
Counselor.
All right, so I just wanted to let everybody know before we start recording and going live is that I'm having really bad internet connection issues. There's an equity issue in my neighborhood, so I don't know what is going on with my internet. So that said, Councilor Breeden, you may have to step in and facilitate. So I hope that you are ready, willing, and able to step in.
I hope so. I need a list of the maybe Wayne sent it to me.
Panelists.
The panelists.
Jacob, can you share with Councilor Breeden the script that you have for me so that she knows where I'm at in the process of things, just in case my internet situation fails?
And Jacob, do you have the list of panelists as well? I know we were still working on it up until a little while ago. If you could send it over to me, that'd be great.
Yes, the script includes a list of the panelists updated as of 2 minutes ago.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, my God.
Yeah. And Councilor Breeden, I think in the interest of elevating the voices of the people, I'm gonna start with, if there are any people with public testimony, I wanna start with the public testimony first. I don't think we have a lot of people signed up, so I just kind of wanna set the tone with the voices of the people first. Is that okay? You feel comfortable with that?
So will we do brief opening remarks and then go straight to the people and then go to the panelists? Is that the way we want to do it?
Yeah, no, we're gonna go, you and I will have remarks, then we'll go to public testimony, then we'll go to our colleagues for their opening statements before we go to the panelists.
Okay.
I think that's how I just wanna, just because we're trying to also keep this within the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, that'd be good. Super.
And yeah, so no, we're all gonna hold ourselves accountable to that. And I'm gonna be extremely making a lot of noise and anybody that's going over. So all panelists need to know that they got, we don't got a lot of time and we gotta just keep it contained.
We shooting to be finished at 3 o'clock because I have a hard stop at, I have yeah.
You wanna be my timer keeper?
Hi Liz,
You
hi
want to be my
Julia.
timer keeper? Hey,
Well,
I see Flynn is in the house. What's the time limit? The time limit is, I think, 5 minutes.
so
You put the timer on at 5 every time somebody starts talking. Okay? It's 1 o'clock. I think we should, in the interest of beginning and ending on time, is everyone camera ready? I can't see y'all. I can't see the whole entire view, but I want to make sure that everybody's ready to go, that your camera ready, that you feel ready to start the live record, which we are ready.
you want to be able to see everybody.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I can see everybody now.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. It's
I'm
1
gonna be
o'clock.
the timekeeper, tell them.
You're going to be my timekeeper, but we're going to start official business, so I can't. You got to be quiet.
You've got an assistant?
I got an assistant. I got to put her to work. She got to earn her keep up in here. All right. So I just want to make sure that our panelists are in the house. Jacob, if you could confirm if everyone's here.
Yes, I believe we're still waiting on Chastity, who said that she would be just a little bit late. And then other than that, I believe we have everyone. Let me just double check.
Okay, great.
Can
So
we
we're,
tell them that when they're coming next up?
We are still waiting on Richard, who just appeared in the attendees list.
okay. All right. So then as people start rolling in, we'll start. Okay, we can't have that noise effect. That's gonna scare everybody. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go live. We're gonna start. Okay.
Like
Yeah, that's fine. But not now. Okay.
that? I know.
Oh,
All right. Are you marked?
it's
Get
it.
set.
That's it.
No, wait. You don't do that until I tell you. Okay. I'm gabbling us in.
Good girl.
I'm calling this hearing to order. For the record, good afternoon, everyone. I am City Councilor at Large and Chair of the Committee on Civil Rights, Julia Mejia. It's Friday, August the 21st, 2020, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on docket 0795, order for a hearing regarding the epidemic violence against transgender and gender non-conforming people. This hearing order is sponsored by the District 9 City Councilor Liz Breeden and myself. The docket was referred to the committee on June 10th, 2020. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies from certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.gov/city/council-TV. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82, Verizon 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee at ccc.civilrights@boston.gov. And we'll make a part of the recorded and available to all counselors. Recognizing our colleagues in order of arrival, I also am joined with my colleagues, Councillor Flynn from District 2 and at-large Councillor Asabi George and our co-sponsor, Councillor Liz Breeden. Our expected speakers today include Aline Morter, President of the LGBTQ Senior Housing, Terrell Andre Valentine, Executive Director of the Mass Transgender Political Coalition, Kamar Porter from Boston Glass, Ms. Tanya V. Executive Director of Mass Equity, Avadro Cavarro from the Boston Human Rights Commission, and Chastity Bodick, Transgender Emergency Fund. I would like to begin with a brief opening statement. We're here for lots of reasons. Now let me put on my glasses, y'all, because I gotta see this better. We're here for a lot of reasons. We're here because in 2020, more transgender individuals have been murdered than any year before it. We're here because the city of Boston needs to address and take accountability for the murders that took place in our city, not just Rita Hayster or Monica Thompson, Georgette Harrod, Monique Rogers, and more. We're here because we shouldn't have to focus on the doom and gloom. We need spaces that lead with an asset-based approach when it comes to the issues we face. We hope to be able to create that space here today where we can openly talk about where we as a city have gone wrong and how we can all do better. I'm looking forward to this conversation because we have an intergenerational panel here with people from a variety of backgrounds, from housing to public health to civic engagement. And if anyone knows anything about our office, we're always about all means all, and everyone has a seat at this table to ensure that every voice is heard. Thank you to everyone who has shown up, and we're excited to get started. We're also been joined by Counselor Andrea Campbell from District 4. And I would like to recognize the docket's other sponsors for opening statements. Counselor Breeden, you now have the floor. I hope that you guys were able to hear any of all that.
Oh, sorry, I better unmute myself, it helps. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to sponsor this somber yet
Okay, because you kind of really scared me.
We're losing you. Are you okay? We said?
Yes.
All right, let's try that again. Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I've lost. What have I lost now? Are you still here? Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to sponsor this somber yet critically important topic of addressing the epidemic of violence against transgender and gender non-conforming people. As a district, as a district council, District 9 City Councillor for Alston Brighton, I want to uplift and acknowledge and name the memorialization of Rita Hester, a Black transgender woman who was murdered in Alston in 1998, which spurred the recognition of the annual International Trans Day of Remembrance every November. The senseless violence against trans folks has been an ongoing issue since before the COVID pandemic. Yet, like other pertinent social issues, the pandemic has exacerbated its impact on the lives of LGBTQ folks, particularly trans people. According to the Human Rights Campaign in 2019, there were 27 violent deaths of trans folks. And with 21 violent deaths this year so far in 2020, we are on track for it to be the deadliest year for trans people. While 75% of the voters in Boston voted to uphold the protections for trans people in public accommodations, this conversation today is critically important to ensure that our city services, agencies and programs adequately address the needs of LGBTQ community, particularly Black and brown trans women. We have much more to do for trans folks, but not just the names of those who make the deadlines, if they do at all. I look forward to hearing from the many panelists who are on public testimony and getting to work on how to better serve the members of the LGBTQ community in Boston. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Breeden. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm having severe internet issues. So if you all can hear me, can just someone say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to take myself off of video in the sake of just trying to preserve whatever little internet access I have. So I apologize on my internet's behalf. So in the spirit of leading with the voices of the people, we're going to do things a little bit different. And we are going to start off the conversation with public testimony. I think it's important for those who are deeply connected to this issue to first have an opportunity to speak, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues for their opening remarks. So just curious if anyone here is lined up and ready, if we have anyone waiting for public testimony, and by a show of blue hands, if any. Jacob, can you help me with identifying whether or not we have anyone set for public testimony?
Yes, it looks like Susan Helmy is the only person who is like.
Okay, so I'm gonna first call on Susan Helmy, please. If we can make sure that she's off muted, that would be great. And actually, you know what, in the interest of just making sure that we are really mindful of pronouns, if when you introduce yourself, can you just let us know what your preferred pronouns are? I go with the she series, just because I think it's important for us not to make those assumptions. And Susan, I apologize. When you introduce yourself, can you just please let us know what your preferred pronouns are? Susan, you now have the floor.
Councilor Mahir,
Yes.
if I may briefly, this is Evander Carvalho, Executive Director of the Boston Human Rights Commission. Susan is part of my team. I told her to come in and help me with notes. I was unsure how long the meeting was going, so she is sticking around. So she's not, essentially she's here in the official capacity as the Executive Assistant of the Boston Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
apologize for that.
Trying to mess up my flow up in here. Okay, I'll let you live. All good.
I apologize.
Good. All right. So then, seeing no public testimony at this point in time, if we do have public testimony that signs up at a later time, voice is heard towards the end. We are trying to end at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to keep this conversation flowing. So bear with me.
I think we may have lost you, Councillor Mejia. You've lost sound. With your permission, Madam Chair, we seem to have lost your sound.
Yep.
I think I will step in and ask Richard Dahill from the LGBTQ liaison of the Boston Police Department. Richard, are you ready to make your testimony?
I had a technical difficulty.
Madam Chair, in your absence, I asked our first panelist to speak. So I think I called on Richard Dahill. I didn't know how long you were going to be
Okay,
away.
so I was just curious. Sorry, or whether or not our colleagues were interested in making open remarks. That's what I had recommended, and
sorry.
I wasn't sure if I had called on Councilor Flynn. Sorry, I just want to give our colleagues, I'm so sorry, guys and girls and everyone else. I just want to make sure that I give everyone an opportunity, our council colleagues, to share a few open remarks.
Very good. Sorry, I missed that.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I want to say thank you to Councilor Mejia and Councilor Braden for sponsoring this hearing, bringing attention to this important and critical issue. I know Councilor Mejia and Councilor Braden have been involved and active on this issue and other issues that impact the lives of LGBTQ neighbors for many years. So we respect the work that you have been doing. Doing some research on this topic, I know, as Julia mentioned, there is an epidemic of violence against transgender and gender non-conforming people. And Black transgender women are particularly impacted by this violence. I represent a large LGBTQ plus community in my district. You know, transgender and gender non-conforming residents should be treated with dignity and respect. They should be afforded protection from discrimination and violence and be able to live freely as themselves without fear of violence. I know Evandro is also on this call from the Human Rights Commission, and that will also play a critical role, I hope, in our city of investigating crimes and violence against LGBTQ residents. So I'm interested to hear about what we can do to protect our transgender, gender non-conforming residents in Boston, learn more about challenges facing the community, and hear from advocates about their experience as well. And I know some of the panelists that will soon speak, and I also respect the work that you're doing. I just want to highlight a neighbor from South Boston, Rich Dahill, who works at the Boston Police that does an exceptional job of outreach on this critical issue. Always had great respect for Rich and his family as well. So thank you, Councilor Braden, and thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. We're gonna now go to Councilor Andrea Campbell from District 4. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you, Councilor Braden, for the partnership. Aiden also thanks everyone here. And as we already know, this issue of violence against our LGBTQ community, particularly our trans community and our Black and brown trans community, is a major issue. It was long before COVID-19 and it has continued. So I appreciated Councilor Braden bringing the data and the stats. So I'm here to listen, of course, to continue to partner in this work and do everything I can, not only to make sure that people are aware of this issue, but that we offer solutions at the local level to solve for it. And I'll just add, I have a very diverse district, and this population that we're discussing today in the context of violence, of course, cares about housing. There's some innovative things going on in the housing space, health inequities, domestic violence. You name it, every issue is relevant. And this population of folks, particularly our trans community, are often left out of the conversation or not at the table. So I think we as a city, all of us probably have to do better. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. And lastly, want to thank Evandro Cavallo and his team at the Human Rights Commission. That's important work that you guys are doing, and it definitely connects to this topic. I know Councilor Edwards and I started some of the work there with Councilor Zakem, and then I'm continuing that with Councilor Flynn, because that commission has tremendous power to really help in terms of a wide range of discrimination cases for this population and so many. So thank you for your work and thank you for being here. And lastly, I'll end, I'm holding my little one here often throughout all of these Zooms. And I want folks to know that we see you, we hear you. I do hope that there will be public testimony, but I think this population in particular, when we say Black Lives Matter, we often have to add a name that the trans community, the LGBTQ community also matter. And so really excited to be a part of the conversation. And again, thank you so much to the makers. This is critical. So thank you both, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilor Campbell. I'd like to invite Councilor Asabi George at large.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to yourself and the maker, Councilor Braden, for bringing this before us today. We think about the work as government officials, and we think about the work that we're charged with as policymakers and legislators, and the work of city government. It is to represent and work for those that feel the least heard and the least represented, and they're often the most vulnerable. So when we think about the work that's before us every single day, and I think especially about my work and the focus of my efforts around education and access to education, when I think about my work around substance use disorders and homelessness and access to mental health services, this community in particular is often the one that is the most left out of not just the access, but the conversations and the dialogue to create better access and better services. So, I think about our role and not just the importance of having the conversation, but the critical nature of the work that is ahead and the work that remains undone every single day. This important conversation today certainly will guide what is left undone and what needs to still happen. So I look forward to participating, but I look most forward to hearing what those action items are, because I think we, for the most part, know what they are, but to hear them and to have them reinforced, especially those with lived experience and the expertise of the experience to inform those decisions and the work that's ahead. This is critical for us to do. So I appreciate the time this afternoon for everyone who was involved in the panelists for sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I moved down, hopefully that I'm closer to the modem. So hopefully you'll be able to see and hear me. So I apologize for all of the technical difficulties. If I don't see any other colleagues here, I would like to, in the interest of time and honoring I know, Eileen, you needed to leave a little bit earlier, so would love to open up with you and then go to Richard. Just wanted to give you the heads up that Richard, you'd be going next. But before you do, Eileen is going to be giving us a presentation. So we'll start with you, Eileen. You now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Eileen Montour. Pronouns are she, hers. And I'm with LGBTQ Senior Housing, Inc. And actually, I think all of you counselors know, because we've received your support and we appreciate it, for developing the first in Boston LGBTQ friendly senior housing, mixed income, mostly for affordable, 50 of 75 units affordable. We came to this because of all the documentation and certainly all the testimony of the increased vulnerability that can come along with aging, as well as already the problems with LGBTQ vulnerability, but folks worrying about where they're going to live as they age and not have to hide their identity or fear of facing discrimination and so forth and so on, not having the supports. So we are, as you know, building 75 units in Hyde Park. And you might ask, so how will we sustain that LGBT identity and how will it help our community? We'll have a presence and an ongoing relationship with both the LGBT Aging Project, LGBTQ Senior Housing. We'll actually have offices in the building and a presence. We'll have ongoing LGBTQ friendly programming, have ongoing LGBTQ cultural competency training for all of the staff. We'll have welcoming signage and related artwork and displays. And we'll be doing continuous community outreach for residents. As well, this will serve as basically a sort of an LGBTQ senior center. We'll have ongoing program services, congregate meal sites in this location. So we'll definitely strongly keep that identity. And whoever comes will know that, you know, discrimination or anything of that sort would not be welcome in this facility. And we have intentionally, over all these years of preparing and laying the groundwork, we've been to the Hyde Park community repeatedly, so many times, to the neighborhood groups and the different organizations and, you know, community programs to tell them right from the very beginning, this would be an LGBT friendly senior community. And we've been warmly welcomed. So we've done a lot of advocacy and education along the way. So I think, again, having a safe place to live for especially, you know, all of us LGBTQ, but especially the trans community and trans community of color, this would be a safe, welcoming addition. And I would say this is our first one in Boston. It's actually the first one in all of New England. And that being said, we're not one and done. So if we find more property that would be suitable, we would do more, because we know there's a huge need. The numbers are great, and 75 units by lottery is not going to take care of all of our people with the need. So kind of in a nutshell. Any questions from you?
I raise my hand. I'm waiting for the madam. Aileen, I just want to thank you for all your advocacy and all your hard work. It's taken many, many years to get this project off the ground, and thank you for your perseverance. You persisted. Thank you.
Persistent. Thank you. Thank you all for your support. It's going to happen.
And I know for older folks in the LGBT community, very often when they were young people and growing up in their communities, they had to hide. It was a very very difficult time, and many of them moved away from their home communities and became more anonymous in big cities. But I know how difficult that time was, and I'm so grateful to you and all your colleagues and other activists for all the great work you've done, because I think this is offering a lot of older LGBT folks a safe haven as they age. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I really do appreciate Councilor Breeden, you are stepping it up. You're such a great co-sponsor because you're helping me facilitate every time my internet goes off. I'm just curious if any of my other colleagues are interested or asking any questions, or I know you are pressed for time, Eileen, and I don't want to hold you hostage.
A little while.
But I'm wondering if any of our colleagues, you want to show a blue hand? Oh, I see Anissa, Councilor Sabi George, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I couldn't find my blue hand. I'm on my phone. Usually I'm on my laptop, so don't know. I can't easily access my blue hand. Anyway, thank you very much for that presentation. I do, as an at-large counselor, we spent a great deal of time in Hyde Park, supporting this project, but hearing from constituents about this project. Can you talk a little bit to some of the negative experiences? Because it was really surprising to hear some of the challenges that you faced in developing and pulling together this project. And I think that really speaks to some of what we're discussing here today.
Sure. So again, we went to the Board of Trade and the main streets, and again, all the neighborhood associations beginning in the summer of 2016. So we've been back several times, and most people were interested, and there were a few people who were, well, not nice, but there were very few. There were just a couple of them, and I think they had personal issues, and the rest of the community actually helped to address those folks. So we felt we had support pretty much all along, and I've been so surprised and gratified and thrilled to find the support coming from all corners of the community in Hyde Park. I mean, it's just been really, really uplifting. So people are strongly welcoming of this, to my own great amazement, but it's been very pleasant to experience that. And I think folks are thinking like, maybe I'll apply to come live there, because it's welcoming, inclusive of everyone, not just LGBTQ folks. So I think it's been very warmly received. I mean, it was challenging waiting for the building to become available for development. We had to wait, but it's happening. We're going forward. We've just received the BPDA approval. We're on to zoning, financing, and I hope 2.5 years we'll be moving people in, if all goes well.
That's fantastic. Really happy to hear that it's moving along. I know it's taken a lot longer than any of us that were supportive wanted it to take. So congratulations on hitting some of those milestones. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I see Councilor Campbell, your hand is up. You have the floor.
Thank you. I won't take too much time just so we can get to the panelists, but Eileen, just wanted to thank you for your hard work on this project and engaging all the counselors on this project. Usually, I'm a district counselor, it's district by district, so really appreciated your intentionality for us to work with you on this this historic project. I also wanted to give a shout out to Councilor McCarthy too, obviously, the previous counselor for District 5, who did a lot of work in making sure all of us on the council were included and a part of the conversations for such a historic project. But thank you, here to continue to support you in the work. So thank you very much, Eileen. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Flynn, I believe you also had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And just want to say thank you to Eileen as well. I look forward to, supporting the project up at the ZBA, and I'm so glad that you included all the city councilors, even councilors outside of the district. So it was great to sit down with some people and learn about the project. And so glad that you reached out to all of the city councilors to educate us on the importance of such a project. So I just wanted to say thank you and good luck.
Again, thank you so much. And again, thank you all for your support. I think it made all the difference actually in winning this project.
I think you're on mute, Julia.
Of course I'm on mute. I just want to say I'm really excited and congratulations on completing this project. I do hope that it's not one and done, and that we have more opportunities to serve more seniors, because that the need is great. So congratulations, and happy that you were able to join us this afternoon. I'm going to move on. You are welcome to stay, but we're gonna let you free if you need to go. It's all good.
Thank you.
In the interest, and thank you again for being here. In the interest of moving things along, and because we do have time constraints, I'm going to ask each of our panelists If we could keep it no more than, for the questions from our panelists, to no more than 5 minutes. I'm gonna go on now to, oops, Aline, if you're still here, I do have a quick question. Are you still here?
I am, yes.
Can you just go, before I release you, sorry, can you just go a little bit into depth about the specific protections that are in place for transgender people when it comes to finding affordable housing, specifically for those seeking shelter or currently living, who are unsheltered at this point?
I'm afraid I'm not your expert on that. I'm just focused, like say, like a laser on getting this one done so we have a place for people to live. And again, with seniors 62 and up. I wish I knew more. I wish there were more. I don't think there probably is too much, since this is unique in the first, like you say, historic living community that would be so welcoming and safe.
Yeah. So then maybe this could be a good model for us to point to.
Yes.
To serve either different age populations, and yeah. Okay,
Yep.
so it's a good model and a good case study for what it looks like moving forward. Thank you for that. I'd like to now continue with the rest of our panel, starting with Richard DeHill. If you're there, you can now have the floor. Is Richard in the house? Did I freeze?
You're still here.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
My name is,
Is that okay? You're
can you
not
see me?
camera ready? If you're not camera ready, it's all good. You don't have to show your face if you're not ready to be.
Actually, I am camera ready, but I don't know why I'm not showing up. Regardless, my name is Richard DeHill, he, him, and I am a Boston Police Deputy Superintendent, and I'm the liaison to the LGBTQ plus community. The first thing I was going to talk about is our outreach that we use in the department. Pre-COVID-19, we had an LGBTQ plus public safety meeting about every 6 weeks, and that was like a combination of law enforcement partners as well as advocates. So included in those meetings were the FBI, the Boston Police, the State Police, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office. And so on the advocate side of people who were invited were the organizers of the first event, the Fenway Community Health, Bagley, GLAD, the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, JRI, and the Trans Emergency Fund. We're all invited to go to these meetings. And they were held about every 6 weeks. Originally, they were held at Boston Police headquarters. And I'm going to be honest, they really weren't that well attended. GLAD was always pretty much there, and the Fenway Community Health was pretty much always there. Boston PD was always there, and the FBI. So we changed over at the request of the advocates to have meetings at different locations. They felt that having the meetings at headquarters was a negative in terms of the advocates coming to respond. So we switched the meetings over to be held at the offices of GLAD, and they were going to be shaping the agenda. And I think we held 3 meetings there, and then COVID happened, and the meetings have sort of been put aside for now. And I also worked a lot with the organizers of First Event. The First Event is if you're not familiar with it, it's a conference for transgender men and women, and it's the first time that they had it this year. It was in Boston. Previously, it was held outside in some of the suburbs, and they had this conference all across the country, and the one in the Massachusetts area is the first one of the year, so that's why they call it the First Event. So I did work with them in helping bring it into Boston for the first time. It was successful, and that was it's always around. Well, that was in like the same weekend as Super Bowl Sunday. We also, as part of our outreach, we do a lot of the planning with the Boston Pride Committee. And again, you know what I mean, that was based on last year. This year, it was mostly done by Zoom meetings until it was finally canceled. We also, the Boston Police Department participates with the Matthew Shepard Foundation. And I also participated in the Human Rights Campaign webinars for city liaisons to the LGBT community. In terms of training that the department offers, each recruit class is trained in LGBT issues, including transgender issues, and that training is provided by the Fenway Community Health Center. And we also have a e-learning class on issues related to transgender that officers are required to take. In terms of our policy, we had a transgender policy was issued in 2013. That was in conjunction with the Mass Transgender Political Coalition. And we are now currently updating our policy. Right now, it's under review by the Bureau of Chiefs. And that was, we're following the recommendations made by the National Center for Transgender Equality. Once it's reviewed by our Bureau of Chiefs, we're going to pass it along to some advocates to see if they're okay with that, and then we will reissue some of the rules that we have. I'd also like to do a quick review of our stats for 2020 and 2019, just so you have an idea of what we're dealing with. So in 2019, we had 118 cases involving LGBTQ biased incidences. And of those, 10 involved victims who were transgender. 5 of those victims were white, 4 were Black, and 1 was Asian. And in 2020, as of 8/20 this month, we had 59 incidents involving sexual orientation bias. 4 involved transgender victims, 3 were Hispanic, and 1 was white. Part of the problem with those stats is that is really just a reflection of the incidents that were investigated by the Civil Rights Unit. And I think sometimes we miss out on that. Some of the victims, including transgender victims, could also be victims related to domestic violence or sexual assault or human trafficking. So those victims wouldn't necessarily be counted in terms of civil rights. And I think we sometimes sort of, we miss that in that, you know what I mean, a transgender person could be a victim just because based on domestic, not necessarily because they're transgender, if that makes sense to anybody. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I just wanted to just give you a little time a warning is if you could kind of in the next 20 seconds wrap up so that we can continue to ask some questions. Just want to make
okay, all right. And the last thing I do want to say is that a lot of these go unreported, and that's something that we need to work on is making sure that marginalized people, including transgender, feel comfortable in reporting any crime that they are a victim of.
Thank you. And sorry, Richard, that we had to, but I do want to make sure that you have an opportunity to answer some questions from our colleagues. So wanted to just be super mindful of time. I know that I did say 5 minutes. I gave you an extra few.
Sorry about that.
You owe me for the next go round. So I'm going to go next to Councilor Breeden. You now have the floor with some questions for Richard, please.
Thank you, Richard. I'm delighted that you're there and doing your wonderful work in the BPD, raising up these issues. And then thank you for joining us this afternoon. In relation to moving the meetings space from police headquarters to GLAD, did you notice an increase in, I know you had a few months, but did you know, notice an increase in participation at that stage? Did that make a difference?
The first one was very well attended. And then the next one was not so much. So I think in an ideal world, I personally would like to go to different advocacy offices, like almost on a rotating basis. So everybody has an opportunity to host the meeting and sort of control the agenda. But it was a little bit more attendance, especially on the first one, and hopefully once we start back up again, we'll continue to get better attendance.
Thank you. It seems like, you know, as an LGBT person myself, going into unfamiliar spaces, especially official spaces, when I was a lot younger, it was a bit daunting at times. So I can understand people's reticence about going into police headquarters. But thank you for moving the venue and rotating it. Seems like a great idea. I also had a question about in the instance of, is there a particular hotline for LGBT violence, or is it just part of the regular reporting system within the BPD?
It's just part of the regular reporting system within the PPD. I have had a lot of instances where one of the advocates would call me and say, you know, this person doesn't feel comfortable about making the reports, and I have made an appointment at the station to walk the person in to go through the process, so that they feel comfortable with me, a police officer, coming with them as an ally as they're making the reports. And that has been somewhat successful. I've only done it a couple times. I'm more than happy to do it as much as requested. But there is some sort of reluctance, I think, for some members of this population not to want to interact with the police at all. And that's something that we need to work on. Yeah.
I also wonder, you know, in terms of the statistics, like the incidents, a lot of these, you know, there's violence out on the street, but also there's violence in the context of your domestic situation. Like, are there any statistics about, you know, breaking down the incidence of domestic violence, intimate partner assaults or whatever, that would give us some more insights into the scale of the problem?
No, I'm gonna try to look into that. But the problem is that, like, the domestic violence unit, human trafficking unit, and sexual assault unit do not necessarily don't track victims as to whether or not if they're transgender. But they do provide services. So we have a family justice center where those units are there, and the service providers do work with transgender, or they'll work with any of the victims, but they have a system in place to assist transgender individuals in getting the services that they need.
That's very helpful to know. Also, I'm concerned, you know, one of the most vulnerable stages of your life as a young LGBT person is that stage when you're sort of asserting your autonomy and finding out who you are as a teenager. And you know, we hear cases of families throwing their kids out in the street or assaulting them. Do we have any metrics on how this is impacting youth, LGBT youth?
I'm going to say it is an impact, and you know, I mean, going back in terms of my own personal experience at that age, I wouldn't necessarily want to be dealing with the police. And I think that reluctance carries through. So like the organization Bagley does not necessarily want to bring police officers into their safe space, and I understand that, but it does continue to sort of it doesn't help in developing relationship between the police and the LGBT community. But I understand it, you know what I mean, just from my own personal experiences, that you might want to go to a safe space and you don't necessarily want a police officer coming in to sort of invade that space. But it's something that we're aware of, and we haven't quite gotten to a solution on that yet.
In terms of the number of LGBT officers in the BPD, do you have any statistics on that?
We don't, and again, we're sort of in a position where we don't ask people. I can tell you from the Boston Police Department is that we have a sizable population of lesbian, gay members, definitely of the department. I can tell you that a good sizable portion are in the upper ranks of the department. But it is not something that that we have numbers on. So we couldn't say we have 10% or 15% of the department is lesbian or gay. We do not have at this time any transgender officers. I think there might be, I know of at least one, an Officer McQueen who works out of Worcester PD, and who's been a very good friend of mine when I assumed this position as a liaison. So that's pretty much what we have so far, but we don't have any solid statistics on the members of the department.
Councilor Breeden.
Thank you. I also, just one last thing, I just want to make a comment. The first, when I came to Boston first, my first gay pride parade, I was in Copley Square, and I walked out of Old South Church, and I saw the mayor of Boston with a police color guard of gay and lesbian officers, and I stood and cried. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that job, and thank you to all the LGBT. All the LGBT officers in the police department. It's very important that you're there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Breeden. I am going to see if, I also want to acknowledge that we've also been joined by Councilor Bach. So she's also with us. And I would like to give our colleagues, I do have a few questions for Richard, but I wanted to, by a show of hands or just wave, if any of my colleagues have any questions. And then what I'd like to do is just have the panelists all speak, and then we'll do a round of questions with everyone, because I think it would be helpful if we can hear from everyone first and then do questions. So that way everyone has an opportunity to be heard, and that we can just do all of our questions in one sitting. Is that okay, colleagues? That's how we're gonna flow, just to keep it moving. Oh, now Richard wants to show his face. I see you. Councilor Flynn, I see your hand up. You have a question for Richard?
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I just want to say thank you to Deputy Dale for his testimony, but his important work on this issue across the city. I just wanted to ask the deputy if he has an idea of LGBTQ domestic violence issues, and a lot of it I would assume is unreported. I had an opportunity to work with Councilor Campbell and visit the Family Justice Institute, but do we have a sense that a lot of these crimes are not reported, and maybe we have to do more public awareness campaigns about services that are available to victims of domestic violence?
I do think there is a underreporting of domestic violence among both men and women. I don't think it's as bad as unreported as it was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. As we become more accepted as part of the community, I think more and more same-sex couples are taking the same opportunities that a regular straight couple would do. So that if they're a victim of violence, they will call 911 or they will avail themselves of services. I think we still have a ways to go, but I think there has been a substantial improvement over the last 10 or 15 years. We don't collect stats, or rather, that's not really true. I do not have those stats, but I can when I get back in the office on Monday. I'll double check to see if I can get the stats on that and forward it to you. And I'm on vacation, so that's why I'm not in uniform and all that kind of stuff. But I will get any information that I don't get to you now. I'll get it to you when I get back into the office on Monday.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you for all your work. And again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Braden as well.
Thank you. So I'm not seeing any other blue hands. I do have a few questions. So just really curious about, does the BPD currently track acts of violence against trans people? Is there any, like a dashboard or any type of tracking system?
We do track it. And again, it's more we track civil rights violations related to transgender individuals, which again, that's sort of different from a transgender person who was involved in, say, a domestic violence incident. That wouldn't be tracked by the civil rights unit. That would just be a domestic violence issue. And those units do not track based on if someone's transgender or not. They'll just, they have their own tracking system. But the civil rights unit does track in terms of if someone's transgender or whatever their sexual orientation might be.
Do you see any benefit towards tracking and to help identify?
I think, and I had, prior to this, I spoke to some of the commanders of the domestic violence unit, the sexual assault unit, and human trafficking unit, and to see, and they have had some incidents involving transgender individuals, but they don't necessarily track on that. But we were going to see if we could sort of pull that information from our records. I don't necessarily know how well that was going to be, because so say if someone is who's transgender and is a victim of human trafficking, I don't think they necessarily think of that as a sort of transgender problem rather than just a human trafficking problem. So they might not break it down that way. But we're going to look into that and see if that's something we can track.
Okay, thank you for that. You mentioned that there's been community meetings, but they haven't been well attended. Besides changing location, what kind of other ways do you plan on boosting attendance, such as offering food at these programs? Is that something that you offer or you can consider doing in the future?
I missed that. You know what I mean? I sort of laugh a little bit on that, because one of the advocates did complain that I didn't give him any food at the meeting. So at the last couple of meetings, we did provide coffee and donuts to bring people in. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is. You know what I mean? And I understand you know what I mean, the reluctance for some groups to sort of meet with me with the police, unless, you know what I mean, it seems to be they really don't want to talk to me unless there is an issue right then that they want to deal with. And I think it's just as the meetings have provided at least some relationship. So they know if they want to talk to someone with the Boston Police Department, they can give me a call, or they can shoot me an email, and they'll know they'll get a response. So I think it's just a process of building bridges, and for some advocates and organizations just to be more familiar with me.
Did my Hello?
Hello, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so before I disappear again, I would just highly advocate that food is definitely a really great way to engage people. This is the last question that I have. What policies are in place to ensure that transgender people are not denamed by police, either on the scene or afterwards?
You sort of dropped out and part of that question. So what policies do we have? Oh, we have a policy. All right. So we have a policy that was
In
created.
regards-
So we do have a policy, and it was a special order that was issued in 2013 in conjunction in working with the Mass Transgender Political Coalition. And they in the department sort of crafted a policy, and part of that does include that, you know, I mean, we're not allowed to stop someone just because they're transgender. We're not allowed to conduct a search to identify who they are. And that was in 2013. And then we're currently updating our policy, and we did that based on the recommendations of the National Center for Transgender Equality. They sort of did a whole sort of top to bottom review of our policies and gave us recommendations. We have we crafted some new policies, and right now they're being reviewed by the bureau chiefs. And once they give an okay with that, we will pass the new policies to some advocacy groups to look it over too before we make it official. So we're in that process right now, and hopefully in the next month or so we'll be able to get that out and implement it.
Thank you for that. I think it's important as you continue to work on that to let our office know. I'm the chair of civil rights, so just engage our office in this process, as well as keeping the line of communication with other activist groups to help inform the thinking. That would be, I always welcome anything that. So.
Absolutely. I will definitely, once we get the okay from the bureau chiefs, I will forward that to you. And anyone else is interested, any of the advocacy groups that's interested to review it before we go make it official.
Yeah, that would be great. And in the interest of not holding everyone here, I just wanted to thank you again. I don't see my colleagues, any other hands up, but would love to be able to move on to the way we're gonna move forward is we're gonna have our panelists each share some remarks, and then we're gonna do one wave of questions. Can keep the conversation going. So without further,
can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
It's Councilor Campbell. I had my hand up, but I at least I think
can't see you.
it's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to thank the deputy, and I'll keep it really quick so we can get to the other panelists. I know I want to be mindful of their time, but I did want to thank him for his work that he's doing every single day in the department, in the community. It's really fantastic. We probably don't thank you enough, Deputy. So really appreciative of your work. I had a lot of questions on the stats, but I can follow up with you as chair, and of course, Councilor Flynn, who I'm working with as well. So thank you so much. And thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Dayhill, I also wanted to thank you for your time and your service, and I'm glad to meet you and looking forward to continuing this partnership.
Thank you.
And I don't know if anyone can hear me because my internet is just really bad, but thank you. I am going to move on to our next speaker, is Kamar Porter from Boston Glass. You now have the floor.
Hello, everyone. As Julia said, thank you for having me. My name is Kamar Porter. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I work at Boston Glass, which is an LGBTQ plus center for youth ages 18 to 25. The prevention network coordinator there. Actually 13 to 25, I'm sorry. I'm also a board member of the Trans Resistance. So shout out to Athena Vaughn, Chasky Bowick, and the Trans Emergency Fund. If anyone's viewing and would like to donate to these very pivotal places, bostonglass@jri.org and transemergencyfund.org are places to visit. I wanted to first talk about silence. and silence always being violent in our community, violence in our community. I want to say to rest in heaven to all the trans victims that have died from any type of violence towards us. And I would also like to say that transgender people, especially trans folks of color, with us, violence can show up in many different ways. And we're an extremely disproportionate community. Some of those ways are not limited to, but are simple as doctor's visits, court hearings, police policing us for things as sex work and other things. Trying to get homes and apartments and experiencing discrimination in public areas, things like bathrooms. And, God forbid that if we were ever locked up, and many of us are jailed, we experience heavy violence while in jail and even in our homes and our communities. I'd like to say that these are some of my own experiences, as well as some of the folks that I know of trans experience. And although I work in the community and I've helped try to steer the wheel a little bit, us not being in places of power and having representation has been like a damning silence in our community and towards our community. So I encourage you all to talk to us while we are here, and we will be here for a very long time. And I want to thank you all and thank Julia, especially for putting on this panel and allowing us to come to some experience of insider experience of what is going on in our communities, experiencing homelessness and having to do sex work out of desperation and things like that are very pivotal things and reasons as to why we are in vulnerable places and experience so much violence within our community. So I thank you all for just listening today and being here to listen and hear us. And I really appreciate that.
I'm getting used to the situation. Thank you, Kamar. Really do appreciate having you here and your voice and all the work that you do on behalf of our most vulnerable young people and creating space for them to step into their power and speak their truth and cause that really good trouble. So thank you for all of it. I'm really happy that you were able to join us today. I'm going to ask, and no, we talked about the interest of time. I'm gonna ask my colleagues to write down any questions that they have for Kamar, and then once we get done with our presentations, we're gonna go back to questions, okay? So we're switching things up in the interest of making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. I am going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is, I've been getting some support from, my next speaker is Andre Valentine. You now have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank the Boston City Council Committee on Civil Rights for the opportunity to provide a statement in regards to the epidemic of violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people. My name is Andre Valentine. My pronouns are he and they, and as the executive director of the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, the statewide organization that advocates for the rights and equity of transgender, non-binary, and all gender expansive people across the state, I receive firsthand accounts of the discrimination, maltreatment, and violence that transgender and gender nonconforming people experience right here in Massachusetts, where we have inclusive statewide non-discrimination protections. As we went on lockdown in March, I received a call from a trans woman who was assaulted by a Trump supporter. When the police were called and they arrived, they treated her as the aggressor and him as the victim. I receive increasing reports of physical and sexual violence in our healthcare facilities and by medical professionals against trans people. Last year, a Black transgender woman was killed by an MBTA train under suspicious circumstances. She was dead named and misgendered in reports and by media, and her family is still awaiting answers as to how she was struck by the train. Last week, I received a call from a transgender man who was verbally assaulted by the concierge of the building in which he worked as a childcare provider. He no longer feels safe entering the building and has since lost his job. The types of violence trans and gender nonconforming people face is not only about homicide. In 2015, the National Center for Trans Equality's US Trans Survey reported that transgender people experience 3 times the rate of unemployment, are twice as likely to live in poverty. 1 in 5 experience homelessness. 1 in 3 had 1 or more negative experiences in a healthcare setting, where they experience either verbal harassment, physical or sexual assault, refusal of treatment, or being misgendered. These experiences are exponentially higher and more challenging if the person is a trans woman or low income, has a disability, is a person of color, more so if they are Black or Indigenous, or if they live in rural areas with less structural support. And all of this is before the coronavirus pandemic, which has only exacerbated these issues. And it is many of these experiences that force trans people into survival economy, which then increases their likelihood of interactions with law enforcement and the courts. All of these are forms of violence: name calling, dead naming, misgendering, laughing, mocking, lack of access and denial of services, threats and acts of physical and sexual harm, systematic unchallenged discrimination and violence from law enforcement, healthcare and educational facilities, and media portrayal of trans people as freaks or a joke or sexual deviant predators or deceptors or attention seekers. These are forms of violence, a well-known constant experience in our culture. And the media plays a huge role in shaping our culture, and they are shaping a culture of violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people. The FBI reported a 34% increase in anti-trans violence between 2017 and 2018. In 2019, there were 26 known reports of trans people who were killed in the United States. 90% were Black, 80% were under the age of 80. There was also a record number of 138 anti-trans bills filed, the highest in anti-trans legislation. This year, so far, at least 27 transgender people have been killed, the majority Black and brown trans women. Right now, transgender women of color have a life expectancy of 35. Every year, the violence against transgender people supersedes the year before. And as the years go on, each year is marked as the deadliest year ever for transgender people. It is simply not enough to have laws in place. People, organizations, corporations, and systems can follow the law without following the intent of the law. Laws and policies do not work without a culture shift in ideology. And that takes internal work on both individual and institutional levels. I want to thank Councilor Breeden and Councilor Mejia for sponsoring this hearing. I hope this is the beginning of many conversations and actions, not only to address violence in all forms against transgender and gender nonconforming people in the Commonwealth, but to also invest in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that you're a part of this conversation and look forward to the question portion from my colleagues, because we all have a lot to learn. And this is such an amazing opportunity for us to take our lead from those who are living the realities. So really do appreciate you being in this space. And I remember hearing you speak at the event that Chastity held like a month or two ago, where I had to talk a man off the ledge. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, I was there and it was great to be in your presence. I'm gonna go next to Tanya Nisula. Tanya, Tanya, first of all, you're gonna say your pronouns and then you're gonna say your last name and school me, okay? Tanya, you now have the floor.
My name is Tanya Neslusin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the executive director of Mass Equality, which is a statewide LGBTQ plus advocacy organization. At least 28 people have been murdered so far this year, compared to 26 transgender people last year at the end of the year. In just 7 months, we've already exceeded the number of transgender folks who have been murdered. Of those victims, 23 were transgender women, 4 were transgender men, and 1 was non-binary. The epidemic of violence is particularly pronounced for Black and Latina trans women. We also need to be cognizant that violence encompasses much more than murder. There are also incidents of assault, both physical and sexual. There are risks that are amplified through higher housing and job insecurities faced by our transgender siblings. Just 2 days ago, a group of transgender women were assaulted and robbed in Los Angeles. Often, crimes that fall short of murder go unreported or are not acknowledged as hate crimes. It is fairly common for initial media reports to misgender and dead name transgender victims of violent crimes, and for their attacks to not be noted as hate crimes. A national transgender discrimination survey reported that 18% of Massachusetts transgender residents reported being physically assaulted and 7% sexually assaulted. Beyond that, there are additional intersectional risks that put people in danger for other forms of violence, including workplace discrimination, housing discrimination and instability, harassment and discrimination in accommodations and services, economic insecurity, and harassment and discrimination at school. The National Center for Transgender Policy's 2019 report, Failing to Protect and Serve Police Department Policies Towards Transgender People, gives Boston Police Department a failing score on several measures, 11 out of 17 measures of police policy accountability, to be exact. Most notably, the failing measures included gender identity, non-binary recognition, transportation, sexual misconduct, placement, bathroom access, immigration enforcement, training, civilian oversight, and use of condoms as evidence. According to a 2013 report by the Anti-Violence Project, trans people are 3.7% more likely to experience police violence and 7 times more likely to experience physical violence when interacting with police than cisgender victims and survivors. We also have problems, according to a joint study by the National Center for Transgender Equality and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, 21% of transgender women have been incarcerated at some point in their lives, compared to a 5% incarceration rate among the general population. That statistic jumps to 47% for Black trans women. This causes problems additionally within the correction system. As recently as 2018, a 52-year-old trans woman in Massachusetts had to sue the state prison system after being housed in a men's prison facility after being convicted of a nonviolent crime. We need to humble ourselves and remember that the International Transgender Day of Remembrance has been observed annually on November 20th as a day to memorialize those who have been murdered as a result of transphobia, and that it was founded to memorialize the murder of Rita Hester in Allston, Massachusetts. Boston is not immune from this epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here and informing the dialogue. And my hope is that we always are having a conversation about a conversation in a public hearing about a public hearing. Our hope really is to get at the core and really help people think and leave these spaces with what we want them to think, feel, and do as a result of being here. Because the time is now for that type of action-oriented follow-up that is needed for our people. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna go next to, I believe our next speaker is Chastity, and then we're gonna go to Ivandro. Chastity, you now have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, just trying to get a quick bite in. Thank you for having me. My name is Chastity Bowick. I am the Executive Director of the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts. And what we do is we strive to give our clients the tools and resources to be sustainable, whether that is by homelessness prevention, rental startup, transportation to their medical appointments. We actually also pay for prescription co-payments if transgender individuals can obtain their testosterone or their hormones, whatever the case may be. We try to make sure that they can obtain those services. And most recently, we started our nutrition program, where we deliver fresh boxes of produce to transgender and gender nonconforming individuals across the state of Massachusetts to provide people with the feeling of having nutritional options. We are oftentimes in the Black community not known to have access to fresh produce and things of that nature. So we try to provide that to our clients. And on a bigger scale, what we're working on is housing. This is a critical issue within the transgender community. You can't tell someone to go get tested for HIV and to get on PrEP if they don't know where they're gonna sleep the next night. I know my own self from being my own homelessness experience. I was too worried about being indulged in survival sex work so I could make sure that I knew I had a meal coming, or I knew I can rent me a hotel room to stay the next night. That is not conducive living. And what we try to do is stop that cycle of oppression. There are no programs in the state or in New England that are actually doing the services that we're doing. And this is only the beginning. In October, we'll be starting our care and support program, where members of our community can get mental health services, and they don't have to worry about insurance. They don't have to worry about the cost. We will be providing these services for them. And then also the main thing is our transitional housing program. We are seeking to obtain a building in the city of Boston to where we can start our transitional housing program, where we can take members of our community off the streets, since we are oftentimes shunned in shelters and substance abuse programs, and give them the tools and resources they need to be sustainable. Whether that is helping them get a GED, go in the trade school. Let's take a look at your Corey. Let's figure out why you're not getting this apartment or why you're not getting this job. And let's break down these issues so that you can become sustainable. But our work has been increasingly devastating since 2016. Since this new White House has taken office, people feel they have the right to abuse us, beat us, rape us, and tell us how we should live our lives. We are tired and we are done letting white cisgender men dictate to us how our livelihood should be and what type of services should be offered to us. So not only are we about helping our clients with direct services, but we are also about policy change. And there needs to be a lot of changes. The 3 trans women that were attacked last week in California by a group of men of color just like broke my heart. But once again, my heart is breaking every week, because every week is another story. It's another girl being beaten. It's another girl being raped. It's another girl being put in a men's prison. It's just so many different issues that we're trying to tackle. And that's where the creation of Trans Resistance Mass came out of, and which helped put on the march that we had back in June in Franklin Park. Because we say no more. We're no longer going to sit around and keep feeding you statistics and keep showing you the numbers and keep reading you the stats, and it get us nowhere. We're going to put our foot on the ground, and we're going to fight and work for what we know we deserve. We're not asking for special privileges. We just want to live equally like everyone else. And I just find that so hard for people to understand and grasp. Like, we're human. just like any other cisgender male or female. They're good ones, they're bad ones. Same thing in the trans community, but you cannot dictate, oh, they're all prostitutes, they're all HIV positive. That's what people look at when they see me. They see a walking HIV prostitute. And furthermore, how do you think people take us when we're going to look for a job or when we're going to apply for that apartment? We're continuously being discriminated against. There's so many ways that they get around it. Of course, we have the new public accommodations law here in Massachusetts, but it's not enough. It's not enough. We need protections on a federal level. So I just hope that the people listening today, my colleagues and that do this work, know that we have a lot more work to do, but we need our city officials, we need our mayor, we need our governor to be on our side. Talk is cheap. I want to see action. And until I do that, we're going to continue fighting this fight because we have a lot more services that we need, and we're not going to stop until we get that. And so the Transgender Emergency Fund is all about reform, it's all about social justice, and we are social justice warriors, and we're here to do the work.
That's right. Well, it's hard to follow that one, Chastity. I don't think anybody wants to go after you right now, but I'm gonna have to put Ivandro on the scene because you are up next, so you got to follow that, Ivandro. You have the floor.
Councilor Mejia, thank you for the invite, particularly the invitation for the Boston Human Rights Commission to be here. For those that do not know me, I am the executive director of the Boston Human Rights Commission. This commission, it's based on law that prohibits discrimination against people within the city of Boston, particularly for this important topic. Obviously, gender identity is a protected class. So I've heard many of you mention this, right? Discrimination happening in so many different ways to the transgender community in the city of Boston and in the state. This commission is unfortunately, but yet fortunately exciting in the sense that it's new. The commissioners finally met for the first 3 or 4 times during COVID. We're trying to get off the ground. Right now, we're putting together benchmarks in terms of what the mission will look like, in terms of what the priorities will look like, at least for the near future, going into FY 2021 as we just began. I can tell you that issues, discrimination against transgender and LGBTQ people in general have come up during our meetings as one of potential priorities that we'll focus on. I believe actually Commissioner Ann Russo talked substantially on this topic. But I came here, I'm excited that I was invited because I was able to listen to so many of the advocates and people's personal stories dealing with this pandemic, violence against transgender people. And I've heard, like many of you, that women of color in particular are disproportionately impacted. To an extent, unfortunately, that's not new, right? It's not isolated to just the transgender people, in a sense that, as we know, as we see through COVID, as we see through wealth gap, people of color and Black and brown people particularly are taking the short end of the stick. So I would like to say that this commission hopefully will be another tool in the toolbox for this community to reach out to. I certainly want to have a deeper conversation with many of the folks that spoke, including Richard over in BPD, as well as Chastity, who unfortunately I had to go behind and did a tremendous job expressing the issues and the passion. I saw it and I felt it. I feel for you. I also want to talk to Trey, all of you, Trey, Tanya, everyone that contributed from the different parts of this issue. I love to engage further. I can tell you that, we're learning as a commission, we're listening, we're hoping to be impactful in people's lives that need the most. And I see this community as at least personally, as a major potential issue that we'll focus on. But just to kind of wrap it up, as many of you know, again, the commissioner is new. We are trying to get off the ground. As I mentioned earlier, Susan Helmy is the executive assistant of the commission. We have a budget of over $500,000 invested from the operational budget that I'm sure all of you are familiar with for the city. So we're looking to hire staff to help us do the work. So, engage us. This is the time, all you city councilors that I see here, Ed Flynn, obviously Councilor Braden, who I believe is one of the key sponsors here. I see Councilor Bach, Campbell earlier, Nisa, all folks that I'm familiar with. This is the time to sort of say, listen, let's see what we can do in this particular issue. So again, thank you, Councilor Mia, for inviting me. And I've learned so much more than I thought I would. So thank you.
Thank you, Evandro, for being here. We really do appreciate your presence, and it speaks volumes to your commitment to this conversation. And I think, this is where we get inspired about what are some of the policies we should be pursuing, what are some of the programming that we need to be putting in place. And so these public hearings are really designed to help inform our thinking on a number of different levels. And I think the speakers that were here today have done just that. And now we have our work to do in those marching orders to help support. So I'm going to go in the interest of keeping going. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we also have been joined by Councilor Edwards. So just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that Councilor Edwards is also with us here today. I'm going to go first for a round of questions. We're going to do no more than 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask my colleagues, we're going to go through one round of questions, just because if we're going to get through this by 3 o'clock, we need to just make sure that we stay on. So we'll just have one round of questions, and I'm going to ask you to ask your questions. And I'm going to go first to the sponsor of this hearing order, to my colleague and co-sponsor, Councilor Breeden. You now have the floor.
Thank you, everyone, for your testimony. There's so much information to share and so much awareness to be raised up and to educate folks. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. I have a parent of a trans person who's been texting me and saying about the experience, and she's echoing many of the things that her daughter is experiencing in the community. Been difficulties even just accessing public accommodations when you go to the movies, or being poorly treated at the hospital appointment and being laughed at and abused, dead named, and etc. There's so many. They don't seem like big things they could seem trivial to those of us who don't experience it, but it's a very deep wound to people if you have to experience that day after day. One experience that she shared was when her daughter came out as trans. She was very concerned about the safety. The first thing that came to her mind as a parent of a trans child was, my child is going to be violently assaulted. My child is going to be in danger. So I really applaud you for your activism and for raising up these very, very important issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Breeden. I am going to ask my colleagues in the order of arrival, which I have to look and get my latest list. I am going to ask Councilor Flynn, if you're still with us. I see that you're not on screen, so you're probably multitasking, because we all sometimes are juggling 101 things. So Councilor Flynn, if you're here, if not, I'll go to the next person, and then you can come back to us. The next person on my list is Councilor Asabi George, and I know your camera ready. Go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the panelists for your presentations this afternoon. I was in and out, so I apologize if this was covered in some of your presentations. If it was, just say so, and I'll go back and review the video. I am curious about the work that might be happening or might not be happening within our school communities, in particular, the Boston Public Schools. I'm a former high school teacher. And, especially during adolescence, making sure that our students have both the information and the support services in place for themselves, and also around educating peers. I think that's a really important piece of the work that you or may or may not do. And I'm curious about the involvement in the school district and the Boston Public Schools in particular. If anyone could speak to that.
So I can, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was hoping that's what I like. Come on, step right up.
So I was going to just say that, let me put this hand down. I was just going to say that Boston Glass definitely works with Boston Public Schools Committee as far as LGBTQ folks and representation. Again, I said that we see folks ages 13 to 25 up to 29 actually for some of the services at Boston Glass. So we are very, very much connected with Boston Public Schools. And before COVID happened, we were going to the schools and providing support for or like kind of like as liaisons and getting support from anyone who had LGBTQ plus advisory boards and things like that. So we would then come in and support them and support getting bathrooms utilization for trans folks and things like that on board, and schools and committees on board with that. So Boston Public Schools have been working very closely with us and doing a great job as far as you know, representation.
Great, I appreciate that. And, you know, as chair of education and someone who spends a lot of time sort of in the education space, any of you that need supports in doing this work, especially with our schools, count me as an advocate and a supporter for that effort. I know that homelessness has come up as one of the challenges and issues that many within our communities deal with and suffer from. Is there anyone that could speak in maybe a little bit more detail about the needs of individuals who are experiencing homelessness? And it also is often tied to substance use disorders and mental health issues. I'm not sure if anyone could sort of reflect on that in a slightly deeper way as it pertains to this community that's at risk.
Yes, I definitely can speak more on that issue.
Please do, Chastity. Thank you.
For a transgender person, when they are experiencing homelessness, it can start off by being kicked out from your family's home for being trans. And then once you're on the street trying to navigate your way, you may end up having to indulge in survival sex work. And to get you through that survival sex work, you turn into survival drug use. And there's all different types of kinds of drugs. And I would just give myself an example. After becoming homeless, after leaving an abusive relationship, first I was told it was an abusive relationship by the police because it was two men having a disagreement. Then the next day I tried to go to a shelter. After I disclosed that I was trans, the next question was, how long have you been HIV positive? As someone who was still new and finding herself, I was very shocked, and I ended up on the street that night and ended up indulging in survival sex work for the next 3 months. And then I got addicted to ecstasy pills to help me get through that sex work. And when I realized that I was tired, I didn't want to do this anymore. I needed help, I wanted help. There was no help for me. When I tried to get into substance abuse treatment programs, they were trying to make me go to a men's program because they were more considered what's between my legs versus what's going on in my head. That's the cycle of oppression that we go through. And so we're trying to figure out ways to break that cycle of oppression. And that's why our transitional housing program is so vitally important for us to get this going, why we need a building. So then we can start our own treatment programs for our community members. Like we have therapists on standby that's ready to jump in, and ready to get it going, because these are the things that we need to break this cycle of oppression. And I can't tell you how many trans women that I've counseling at this very moment who are currently in the streets, will not go in a shelter because they're told to go to the men's shelter because they don't look feminine enough, or they're being shunned by the staff. People are opening the doors up on us in showers, pointing to find out what's in between our legs. It's like we are a freak show. So it's like I said, that's why I say the homelessness piece is so very critical, because that can stop the effect of a lot of other things that happens, the drug use, the mental health issues, because when you're doing those types of actions, that is going to weigh on your mental psyche. Like I would never be the same again as I was before that. But I had to find a way for myself to navigate my way out of it, which was very, very difficult. And I think it would have been a lot easier if there was a program like Minds Today to help me with that.
Thank you very much, Chastity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Sabi George, for your questions, and again to the panelists who have responded. I'm going to go next to Councilor Campbell. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you so much to the panelists. And I had goosebumps through much of the testimony, because I know that all of you are doing much of this work in your professional capacities, but you also have your stories that connect, your personal that connects to the work, and have probably suffered your own trauma with respect to the very issues you're talking about. So just appreciate the level of vulnerability. And then, of course, the call to action. I am with you. I hate just continuing to look at stats. They're going to get worse. We know them. They're already horrific. Let's start to do something. So for the sake of time, I'll be quick. Chastity, on the building piece, one of the things we've been tackling in my office is called our vacant lot project. We've been looking at city-owned buildings that have been vacant, or parcels of land that could be built on, that have been sitting there for years. And they're typically largely in my district, but in communities of color. And so we have been tackling working in partnership with Wentworth, so many institutions, to try to activate these spaces for community purpose. So if you could follow up with us on what you were specifically talking about, that would be great. Would love to continue that conversation as we connect with folks in the city and certain departments. I would have put my email in the chat, but there's no chat feature here. So it's just andrea.campbell@boston.gov. I check my own email. So do follow up. Would love to pull you in there and give you updates on what we're doing there. And then I have a couple of questions. I know I only have probably 3 minutes now. On the commission, so Evandro, you were talking about this is in the toolbox, and the commission is such a critical piece to this work of tackling discrimination. And it has such a wide and broad category of protections. Of course, we want it to be a space, an institution, and a mechanism that everyone feels safe and comfortable to use. And I know Councilor Edwards joined. I mentioned her earlier as we've been tackling this issue. And it was great to have the mayor bring it back. But I'm curious, Evandro, what is the timeline currently in terms of being able to actually receive complaints from the community, to respond with appropriate sanctions and various things? There's so many tools there within this toolkit at the commission. So I'm just curious what the timeline is there. And then my second question is for Trey Andre, which is, first of all, thank you, because I think you really hit upon what we often talk about. It's not just about laws and policies and practices. It's culture. It's in what's in our hearts. It's what is in our minds and our spirits. So all of us have work to do with respect to prejudices. We all carry something. But I'm curious to hear from you specifically what the city could be doing more of to shift our culture in our various departments, in the council, other places, to be able to respond more appropriately when it comes to this work, but all the work that we do. Those are my two questions, Councilor Mejia.
I'm just saying, in the interest of time, I'm gonna have Evandro answer, and then we'll go to Trayvon,
and then I'm done. So thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councilor. I'm happy that the interest of time connect with you offline and discuss further. I can tell you this much, that we are essentially at this point drafting the intake form. We are narrowing the creating and drafting the actual mission statement and narrowing the priorities. So in terms of potentially actually taking in cases and helping people out in the next several months, I'm thinking as we go into the fall, we're likely going to get in a position to do that. Right now, it just taking consideration the staff that we have so far. Obviously, as you know, we have to go through the PRC process. PRC as in you know, the hiring ways of the city to get more people hired, but we are at least at this juncture getting the basics on, so that when someone, say Chastity, calls or emails with potential person that wants to make a complaint, we say, here's the intake, or go to our website and fill out the form. So we're getting the basic infrastructure in place to get ready to do those things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andre?
Yes, thank you for your question. What can the city do? I think there's such a range of things that people can do. It can be really, really small to something like really, really big, right? One of the things that we can start to think about and talk about is actually instilling some LGBTQ curriculum in schools, right? To begin with, because Kamar made the point that it sort of like starts off with silence, right? That's one of the things. It's starting off with silence and erasure. And so when we have curriculum in schools, I think that can help to change the culture. Working with I think the media and the way we also talk about trans people and people who are gender non-conforming, right? To really challenge those views, the views that Chastity brought up, to really work against that narrative, and also to do things that go towards investing. That's one of the things that I see is actually a lack of investment of us as people and our potential to self-actualize and to really fully participate in our society, right? And so I think that there needs to be a investment in our education and making sure that is inclusive, making sure that that those places are as safe. No place is safe, right? Let's just be real, right? But as safe as possible, right? And that even within our healthcare centers, right? That the people, not only the doctors, but everyone who is involved, that they know how to treat trans people and how to refer to trans people and not you, and not misgender, and not that name. And I think it's also as big as policy change, right? And things like when we're thinking about even during the pandemic right now, any of the research that's being done, trans people aren't being involved in that, right? Even with the research that's being done, right? And with the vaccines, trans people aren't being involved. So even policies that are that big, I think it's a range of things that we can do. There's so much.
So much.
Andre, we're going to invite you to be part of our policy think tank, because there are a lot of ideas that are coming here. This is why we host public hearings. You know, oftentimes people think it's just about accountability, but this is where the real information lies. It's the people who are living the realities and doing the work that inform our thinking, because these nuggets and the things that we're learning here are going to set the tone for the type of things that we pursue in the future. So it's important for people to recognize the importance of these public hearings from that space.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And, you know, Councilor Campbell, I am going to move on to the next one. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to Councilor Bach. Do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Campbell took my main question about sort of actionable follow-up. So I guess I'll just quickly ask Evandro whether there's anything. I know the Human Rights Commission were sort of operating off of an old like statute and authority, and I'm just curious whether any of our like language about protected classes for the commission makes any reference to trans folks, or whether there's any like work we need to do there for this to be the best tool for protecting their rights as well.
Yes, in fact, I believe the actual language is gender identity is protected, right? In the sense that no matter the choice you make, right? So it should be covered under the language. But to go back briefly on something that Trey, for instance, said is you know, the Human Rights Commission, beyond taking complaints, can also do education, right? I do think that transgender community, this is a space that is right for the narrative to be changed, right? For people to understand what the in fact, when I came into City Hall and I saw people put in their he or she, their pronouns in, it didn't automatically register to what that meant, right? I think there's this commission was created in the 80s, I believe. A lot of it was because back then was the gay and lesbian community, as it was known back then, didn't have a place to go, right? Because there didn't exist federal protection back then too. So I think the transgender community, it's sort of, to some extent, evolved from that community, and it's new, right? A lot of the language that we're using, that I'm hearing here for today, as someone who's, to some extent, could say well-educated, I'm adjusting to understand, the different lingo that exists. So I think a lot of it is education, is a key component that the Human Rights Commission can also help with.
Great. Thanks so much. And yeah, I think, Madam Chair, between that and the questions about BPS, I think my colleagues have covered the area. I just really want to thank everybody for sharing your witness today, and definitely agree with you, Madam Chair, that this has to be a first step of a continuing conversation about how the council and the city can support folks in the city and more broadly. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bach. I'm going to move on to Councillor Edwards. You now have the floor.
Hi. So one, I wanted to thank you for your vulnerability, for your honesty, and for your frankness, and helping us to understand how we as a city can do better. And so I've taken down some notes specifically about City Council. I am curious. I
think we've lost you, Councillor Edwards. Got you.
Sorry about that. One question is, are there any ideal city ordinances or laws that you look to in the country that we should be emulating or enhancing? I know that our human rights laws, or Human Rights Commission, is actually one of the most robust in the state. But let's look beyond our own state and see if there's other examples of cities doing things better in terms of the legal structure. And then I could say over here in East Boston, we just started to have, I think for the last 5 years, we started to raise our own pride flag. And there's a growing community of gay, lesbian, and trans folks in the community. And I'm asking for what we can do together, or what we can call on you to do within our communities to have these intimate, real conversations about lived experiences of our neighbors. And I think that's just as important as laws, because we have we passed, question free, we did all those things. We made sure that legally, in certain senses, we have that, but still there's a huge amount of lived pain, huge amount of discrimination, huge amount of despair, and that people experience. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that on the day-to-day, that law hasn't trickled down or changed a lot of minds. It's just prevented them from causing some kinds of injury, and only when they're notified, and only when you can go to court, and only when you can have access to that defense. But I believe in the day-to-day difficult conversations. We have a series of them for kids with police officers on race and equity. And I would love to start some of these conversations in East Boston. We're a little isolated anyway. We don't really necessarily go. So I'd love to have those conversations. I'll tell you one conversation my church decided to have was to collect petitions in the foyer to put question 3 on the ballot to begin with. And that was my house of worship, and me and the priest got into it. I don't have to put all my business out there, but that's what I couldn't imagine anybody whose child is trans, who is trans, what that means, regardless of how the question passed. They just learned that this house of worship and these folks here don't see me as a human being. So I'm curious about any legal laws that you find to be ideal that we should be emulating, or if we're, and then how do we have those conversations with you or on our own to really make the laws and the spirit of those laws real.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And I'm going to ask, just in the interest of time, if some of our panelists can speak to that. Maybe one or two, just in the interest of time, and then the rest we could definitely follow up. So Tanya, I see you shaking your head. I don't want to call you out. Chastity, I know you were talking about policy earlier, so I'm just curious, Treyandre or Kamar, if anyone wants to speak on this. I think it's a really great question and a great opportunity to really inform what should we here in the local level be doing from a policy and law space. You want me to call somebody out? Because I will.
Oh, I'll jump right on in. So I feel as though we need our policymakers to listen to us, what we say we need, instead of just coming up with these wild things that they come up with and say, nope, that's all they need, and they don't need these protections, and they don't need this. No, there's a reason why we say we need what we need. And I think that, number one, not only bringing us to the table when making these decisions, but also I think that we just need more people in office that really care about humanity in general, because that's the problem that I see with Congress. They've been here too long. That's the problem. So I think that we need to hold us as a community, we need to hold our policymakers like yourselves accountable for putting these laws in place that we say we need. Just like, you know, why is it now 2020, we're talking about banning a police chokehold? It's like things that should been done, let's get it done. And I don't know what it takes, because I'm not into politics like that, but I would say that let us know what we need to do. Let us know what we need to do to help you get these policies in place and get these laws intact. Because I'm more than willing to do my part. I know the people I work with will be willing to do their part, but I think we need to know, what do you need from us to make these laws happen? What do you need from us to make sure that we're not discriminated against in housing or seeking services in substance abuse treatment programs and shelters? What do we need to do? I think that's the biggest question we would have for you, and then to bring us to the table for the conversation.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering if any other panelists, I see you, Tanya, you have the floor with your screen, your screen situation, but you're here, I see you.
All right, so I just to be clear, I'm not trying to be a shy violet, but I do want to, I am a member of the LGBT community, but I am not a member of the trans community. So I want to make sure that the trans voices are heard first in this. I think from a policy perspective, I think the very first thing we need to do is look at data. We fought really hard to try, Treyandre mentioned during the COVID epidemic, to get that healthcare data. There's a lot of data that's missing. Officer Dahill mentioned that they don't have statistics on what the percentage of community members in the Boston Police Department are there. And without actually having data, it's really difficult to formulate policy. I would like to say that there is an ideal model somewhere out there in the world. I think if there were one, more communities would be copying it, and we wouldn't have this international epidemic. It's not just the United States. The UK has seen a spike in transgender violence this year as well. This is something that's crucial. There is data out there. There's data on homelessness. There's data on housing. There's data on employment discrimination. We know that the layers that go into any kind of violence. And I will also say, with regard to intimate partner violence, just because something happens between two people that know each other, it does not mean that it's not a hate crime. And I think that that's important to note. And we need to make sure that we have a sound policy for hate crime reporting and for gender identity and reporting, and so that we can catalog the data so that we know what the scope of the impact really is across all of these communities and how we can effectively combat them, because each community is its own microcosm, and what works in Seattle might not work in Boston. And I think we need to be cognizant of that as well.
That's right. Thank you for that. I'm going to, it is now 2:54. And I know Councilor Flynn, you left and you came back, so I'm gonna be nice and see if you have one question that you want to put out into the space, because then I would like to, I haven't asked my questions either, and I want to make sure that we're respectful of the time. And I also, before I move on, wanted to ask Councilor Edwards, that we're moving on to the next speaker, unless you have anything else to say, Councilor Edwards. I think we've reached our time with you, if that's okay.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councilor Flynn, one question.
Thank you. I just had a quick follow-up to Evandro, who I think is doing an excellent job at the Human Rights Commission. It was established in 1984 under Mayor Flynn, but then it was almost deactivated in the mid 90s for about 15 years. But then Mayor Walsh brought it back, which I think was one of the best decisions in city government. But I just want to ask Evandro, do you have any plans to talk to residents of Boston about the Human Rights Commission, whether you plan to promote the Human Rights Commission, let people know how to activate it, what it's all about, and if they do want to file a complaint, how they would do that. But do you plan to do a public awareness campaign on the Human Rights Commission?
You're muted, Evandro.
Thank you. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor, thank you for that question, and thank you for your support for the Human Rights Commission. I definitely want to give kudos to your father, Mayor Flynn, for his leadership on this, even in the 80s, right? I think as one of the councilors mentioned earlier, the fact that the commission is so robust and so general, it speaks volumes to our city. We are, as a commission, in fact, that one of the things that we discussed in the last meeting was this, potentially not only having meetings as we have public meetings, but to find ways to communicate with people throughout the city, particularly under COVID. I can tell you that one of the people, hopefully, that will be hiring, it will be, maybe the title may change, but an education and outreach coordinator that's going to be devising exactly that plan to figure out how do we get our message out there, how do we build our website. As you know, before COVID, often these community meetings throughout the city that happen, that all of you attend all the time, so they would come to these meetings and speak and have flyers in terms of what we're doing. So that's certainly in the plan to hire someone to focus on that, Council.
Thank you, Evandro, and I appreciate that. And just as a point of reference, one of the reasons I voted for the mayor's budget, among many reasons, is the mayor significantly put funding into the Human Rights Commission to make sure it is active throughout the neighborhood. So thank you to Mayor Walsh and to Evandro as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Sorry to rush you, but I know that Councilor Breeden is blowing up my phone, letting me know that she has to leave at 3. So I'm going to let you speak and say your last words, Councilor Breeden, so that I can ask my questions, because I know you got to go. So, Councilor.
Thank you so much. I'm really apologize. I have to dash off. I have a 3 o'clock non-movable event. Thank you so much. This has been an incredibly important and useful conversation. I feel that it's the first step in a journey, and I look forward to working with Councillor Mejia and all of you to try and advance this work and address the severe and difficult situation for our trans brothers and sisters in Boston and further afield. So thank you so much. I look forward to continuing the work, and thanks for the time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councilor Breeden. I'm going to go to, I do have a quick question for Evandro. Is the commission open to expanding the definition of protected class beyond just gender identity, perhaps to specifically include transgender and gender non-conforming individuals? And what would that process look like?
One second. Start video. Can you hear me? Okay. Hey, you know what? Maybe let's put it this way. I remember that the gender identity is one of the protected classes. I'm not 100% sure that that transgender is not mentioned in it, right? But to go to your point, we can, right? One of the things that the commission can do and should be doing is one, as was told in the bill, is to study discrimination and make recommendations to the city council or to the mayor about how to update it. So this could be, again, which is one of the reasons why I want to keep talking to some of the advocates here beyond today, as some maybe change in the laws. We can do. Look at what other states are doing, what other cities are doing, and say, okay, there's a gap here in the city of Boston, and make recommendations to you all to update it. So again, it's an ordinance that obviously has to go through both the city council and the mayor, working with the commission.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I think this is an opportunity to explore this and unpack it further and figure out the how we move the work times. And what was appropriate for 1980 is very different from 2020. And there is some energy.
Did I freeze or?
I think our chair has frozen.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if it was.
But I imagine that what she's saying is that obviously that, and it really is dovetailing with the question I had asked, right? That the mechanisms we might need legally in this time, given how far we've come, despite how much ground we still have to cover, we might need different categories than were put into the legislation in '84. And it would be worth talking to the advocate community here, having everybody look at that language in the HRC enabling legislation and just see whether it really suits our purposes. Because obviously, we would want people, hey, Madam Chair, you're back.
I told y'all, I'm like, I don't even know where I left off, but.
You were, I was trying to finish your sentence about how 1984 is different from today and we might need to update the language to best protect our people now.
Oh, well, see, I love the fact that you understand exactly that's exactly where I was going. And this hearing presents itself as an opportunity for us to move beyond the dialogue and let's look at what we need in this moment in time. And there's a lot of energy for that. So with that said, just in the interest of ending on time, would just like to thank all of our panelists for being here, the administration and my colleagues for not just showing up, but for being fully present. The deputy, Dayhill, is so great to meet you, even if it's via Zoom. But that's what we need to do is we all need to continue to be in dialogue and community with each other. So more importantly is what we do after the conversation that moves the work forward. So thank you again for being here. See our office as partners. Our colleagues that participated are deeply committed to this conversation. And thank you again to the administration for being all in. And more importantly, to our city council central staff who make magic happen every single day for us on behalf of the counselors. So thank you all. Have a beautiful weekend. So great to be here with you all. But in the interest of time, I gotta go. Y'all do too. So peace, see you later. Thank you. Oh, and this meeting is adjourned, my gavel. We're now done. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Thank you.